John Dorsey wiped the sweat from his brow as the welding sparks flickered like fiery fireflies around the dimly lit garage. It was 3 in the morning in the quiet town of Ashwood, population just shy of 15,000, where the steel mills had long since faded but the blue-collar spirit still lingered in the air. John, a burly man in his late 30s with calloused hands and a face weathered by years of hard labor, nursed a lukewarm lager and tried to finish a stubborn repair job that had already cost him half the night. The flickering blue flame from his welding torch cast long, dancing shadows across the cracked concrete walls. That's when his eyes caught something that made his blood run as cold as the December wind outside. An open suitcase perched on the workbench, belonging to his wife, Emma. Inside lay a pristine nurse's uniform, crisp white with a bright red cross stitched on the pocket, next to a nun's habit complete with the starched headpiece. Beneath the costumes was a pack of condoms and a small bottle of vodka. John set down his torch carefully, the polyester nurse's dress feeling cheap and out of place in his rough hands. Apparently, the hospital and the church have very particular dress codes for business trips. He muttered to the empty garage, bitterness bubbling under his breath. John had been a welder for 15 years, a fixture in Ashwood's struggling industrial neighborhood. He married Emma Walsh when they were both 25, young and foolish enough to believe love could weather any storm. Now, at 38, he was staring at unmistakable proof that Emma's games had nothing to do with him. The suitcase was one of those sleek, hard-shell affairs, so unlike the battered duffel bag he'd toted since high school. Inside, amidst the lingerie and vodka, were items that screamed of a life John barely recognized. Expensive perfume, lace underwear he'd never seen, and a sleek silk nightgown that cost more than his daily wage. But it was the burner phone hidden in the side pocket that struck him deepest. The kind you buy when you want to disappear without a trace. Opening it, John scrolled through text messages from someone saved as Slick. Weekend getaways on. Don't forget the nurse outfit. Room 237. I'll be waiting. Tell John you're at that boring conference. He's too dumb to check. John's jaw clenched. He'd suspected. The late nights, the sudden obsession with professional development, the way Emma now wore makeup just to take out the trash. It all made sense now. But the cruel casualness of those texts, the assumption that he was a clueless fool, that stung more than the betrayal. Further messages revealed months of secret plans, intimate details, and then the name he dreaded most, Cliff Hudson. Slick, his former best mate, the man who'd stood by him at their wedding, shared beers on Sundays, and helped build the very garage John now worked in. Cliff, who was married to Linda and ran an auto body shop on the edge of town. John set the phone down, hands steady but heart pounding. A cold, calculating calm settled over him, the kind that comes just before you cross a line you can't uncross. He grabbed a sewing needle from his workbench and meticulously poked tiny holes in every condom in the pack, invisible to the naked eye but enough to unravel more than just fabric. Congratulations, John whispered, voice low and sharp. You're gonna be parents. He packed everything back into the suitcase, except the phone. There was a call he needed to make. Hello? Morning, Slick, John said, the nickname dripping with venom. It's John. Thought you'd want to hear some news. John, it's 3 in the morning, everything all right? Oh, peachy. Just found out you and Emma have something to celebrate soon. Silence stretched like an empty football field. Look, I don't know what you're talking about, mate. You sound drunk. Congratulations, Cliff. You're going to be a daddy. Tell Emma she's homeless now. John hung up, heart pounding. He loaded Emma's things, her suitcase, jewelry box, the expensive clothes she'd bought with their joint account, into the back of his beat-up Ford F-150. The drive to Cliff's modest ranch house on Elm Street was slow and heavy with meaning. Passing the shuttered mill, the local diner still open for night shifts, the high school where he and Emma had met, John felt the weight of all the memories crumbling around him. Cliff's Mustang was parked out front, gleaming despite the hour. John blocked it in with his truck, lugged the suitcase and 2 heavy bags up to the porch, and rang the bell. The door swung open to reveal Linda Hudson, her hair tousled and eyes bleary with sleep. She blinked at John, confusion painting her face. John? What's going on? It's the middle of the night. John gestured toward the bags. Your husband's girlfriend left some things at my place. Thought you might want them back. Linda's face went through a storm of emotions. Confusion, realization, then quiet acceptance. She's not the first, Linda whispered. The words hitting John like a gut punch. I'm sorry, he said. But there was no apology that could fix this. Linda nodded, took the suitcase, and closed the door softly, leaving John alone on the porch. Marriage shattered like the glass in his welding shop window. Across the street, a curtain twitched. Rosie Martin, the neighborhood's unofficial news source, was already gathering the first whispers of Ashwood's biggest scandal in years. John climbed into his truck and drove home through the empty streets, past the 24-hour diner where night shift workers grabbed coffee, past the police station where Officer Brady probably napped in his car, past all the landmarks of a life now completely upended. Back home, John sat at the kitchen table, bourbon in hand, waiting for Emma's inevitable return. The clock read 4:17 a.m. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge and a distant train whistle. When Emma's car finally rolled into the driveway at 5:30, her heels clicked sharply on the hardwood floor, a familiar sound that now felt like a taunt. "John," she called, voice tired but guarded. "Why are you up so early?" "Insomnia," John replied, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Gives you time to think. Time to find things you weren't meant to see." Emma appeared in the doorway, dressed for work. Black slacks, crisp white blouse, hair pulled back into a tight bun. Tired? Yes, but now there was something else in her eyes. "Fear. You've been drinking," she said accusingly. "Just a nightcap," John smirked. "Or maybe a morning cap. Hard to tell when you've been out all night." "How was your conference? Love? Learn anything interesting about logistics?" Her face paled, but she recovered with practiced ease. "It ran late. Drinks after. I should have called, but you were busy. Important business." He nodded slowly. "Speaking of which, you might want to check your suitcase. You left a few things behind." The color drained completely from her face. "What things?" John's smile was cold. "Your husband's trust. Right here in the garage, next to the nun's costume and your boyfriend's love letters." Emma sank into the chair opposite him. Silence thickened the air, punctuated only by the ticking clock marking the death of their marriage. "How long?" John asked. 3 months. She whispered. "In our bed." "No," she said quickly, eyes down. "Never here. I wouldn't." "Well, you have standards." "How comforting." He drained his glass with a hard thud. Motels, hotel rooms, the back seat of his Mustang like teenagers. It just happened. We were both going through rough patches. John held up a hand. "Don't you dare make this about rough patches or self-help nonsense. You made a choice. To lie to me, to sneak around with my best mate, to make me look like a fool in front of the whole town." Tears slipped down Emma's cheeks, but John felt nothing but hollow emptiness. She looked like his wife but was a stranger. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't want you to say anything. Pack what's left of your things and get out of my house." "Our house. Both our names on the mortgage. Your stuff's already at Cliff's." Linda was understanding. "Turns out you're not his first side piece. Congratulations. You're part of a pattern." Emma's head snapped up. "You told Linda?" "Didn't have to." He shook his head. "She figured it out. She's had practice." "You bastard," Emma hissed, venom thick in her voice. "You couldn't just talk. You had to humiliate me. I ruined everything." John laughed, humorless. "That's rich." She stood, chair scraping the floor. "This isn't over. I've got rights. A lawyer." "Well, good for you. Hope he's better in court than Cliff is in bed." She slapped him hard. His cheek stung, but he only smiled. "Feel better? Go to hell." "Already there, sweetheart. Already there." She stormed out. Minutes later, her car roared away. John poured another bourbon as dawn painted the sky over Ashwood, the day's first light illuminating a life forever changed. By mid-morning, John's phone was buzzing like a swarm of angry bees. First came Kyle, his 19-year-old son studying engineering in Columbus. "Dad, what's going on?" "Mom just called me crying, saying you kicked her out." Kyle's voice was tight with worry. He was the one bright spot in John's fractured world, a blend of his mother's smarts and his own grit. "We're having some problems. Son. Mum's staying elsewhere for a while. Problems? Dad. She said you embarrassed her. Said you're having a breakdown. John sighed, swirling the lukewarm coffee in his hand. She made some choices, Kyle. Now she's dealing with the consequences. Focus on school, mate. This is on me. There was a long pause on the line, and John knew Kyle understood without him having to say more. After the call, the barrage continued. His brother Mike from Cleveland, sister Sarah in Leeds, and then work contacts checking if he was still functional. By noon, John unplugged both his landline and phone, craving silence. That's when Rosie Martin knocked on his door. Rosie, 65, retired from the local phone company, was Ashwood's unofficial news anchor and moral compass, always armed with a plate of her famous beef stew tamales. John, honey, she said warmly, stepping in and settling into Emma's favorite chair. I saw you last night dropping off those bags at the Hudson's. Linda's a saint, J.D. Cliff's a snake. Seen him sneaking around for years, different women, different cars. John nodded grimly. Why didn't anyone say anything? Rosie shrugged. Not my business. But when he started sniffing around your wife, it became mine. Saw them at that motel on Route 9 about a month back. You wouldn't have believed me then. I wouldn't have. Some things a man has to learn himself. But now you need to know what you're up against. Emma's not going quietly. She's got friends like Brenda Miles at Henderson Logistics. Sharp as a tack, but mean as a rattlesnake. John grimaced. He knew Brenda. Single, bitter, and a fixture in the HR department. She's been feeding Emma ideas. Women's liberation, independence, all that jazz. But Brenda's got a dark streak. She probably encouraged all this. And legally she's talking to Dave Brennan, divorce lawyer for the rich and ruthless. Emma's scared, J.D. Scared and angry. That's a dangerous cocktail. John stared at the floor, the weight of it all pressing down like a steel beam. Later that afternoon found John at the Anvil, the dive bar owned by Coach Braddock, a grizzled ex-boxer with arms like tree trunks and a wisdom carved from hard knocks. J.D. Coach greeted, sliding a bitter lager his way. Heard you had some excitement last night. Word travels fast in Ashwood. John took a long sip and asked, what do you know about divorce lawyers? Coach snorted. Vultures circling wreckage. Dave Brennan's top shelf. Don't get out of bed for less than $5,000 up front. Where's Emma getting that kind of cash? Coach shrugged. Don't ask me, mate. But here's the thing, lawyers don't win fights, they get paid. You win with info, leverage, dirt, stuff they don't want you to find, like spying. More like paying attention. Document everything. Court's a boxing ring. It's not the best fighter who wins, but the one who can prove he took the hardest hits. John nodded, the gears turning. That evening, he sat parked across from Henderson Logistics, watching Emma and Brenda leave the building together. He followed them discreetly to a rundown motel, heart pounding as they settled at a picnic table near the office. Rolling down the window, John caught fragments of their conversation. Can't believe he humiliated me. Dropping my things at Linda's house like I'm a criminal. Brenda's voice was cold. Classic abuser move. Make you feel small so you crawl back. Abuser? John's jaw clenched. I've never laid a hand on her. Doesn't matter. Words are weapons now. Emotional abuse, public humiliation, that's the narrative Dave wants. What about the business? Dave reckons half's worth 50 to 60 grand. Plus alimony, legal fees. We play it smart. John felt the cold sweat of fear. The fight wasn't just personal. It was a financial war. The next day, as he tried to work in the garage, a sleek silver BMW pulled up. Dave Brennan stepped out, confidence dripping from his tailored suit. Mr. Dorsey, I represent your wife in this dissolution. John's lip curled. Dissolution? Fancy word for divorce. Brennan handed him a thick envelope of legal papers demanding half the assets, alimony, and fees. Your wife's being reasonable. Brennan smiled, all teeth. Cooperate and we keep it civil. John scoffed. Fair? That's a joke. Brennan's grin faded. Don't cooperate and it gets expensive. For you. John swallowed hard, realizing this was no longer just about love or betrayal. At Tom Walsh's cramped office later that day, John spilled the story. Tom, a weary lawyer with a coffee-stained tie, Nodded grimly. Brennan's a shark. You need leverage. Evidence. Dirt. John felt the weight press down again. That night at the anvil, a group of familiar faces gathered. Tommy Morrison, Pete Kowalski, Mike Chun, they all offered advice ranging from practical to illegal. You should make them pay. Pete growled. Sue for everything. John shook his head. It's not that simple. Tommy clapped him on the back. You've got friends here, JD. Don't forget that. Stumbling outside, John almost collided with a familiar figure. Cliff Hudson. JD, mate, we need to talk. John laughed bitterly. Yeah, about you screwing my wife for 3 months. Cliff's face flushed. It wasn't supposed to happen. Megan was unhappy. Linda and I have problems. Brilliant plan. Destroy 2 marriages. You don't have to be an arse. Cliff said nervously. I don't have to be a patsy either. Cliff pleaded ignorance. Megan ended it yesterday. Said she wanted to fix things. John stared. I threw her out. Served divorce papers this morning. Cliff's confusion was genuine. But John knew better. She lied to you, too. John walked away, the betrayal cutting deeper than any weld. The next morning, Jim Henderson, Emma's boss, called. Concerns had arisen about Emma's work. Missed deadlines, absences. Worse, she'd accused John of harassment and stalking. John denied everything, but Henderson's investigation revealed Emma was using company resources to wage her war, calling her lawyer and a private investigator during work hours. Sounds like grounds for termination, Henderson said. I wanted to warn you. John felt the walls closing in. Back at the anvil, Coach laid it out. She's building a case to paint you unstable. You fight back smart. Find out what they're hiding. As if on cue, Brenda Miles swaggered in, sliding onto the stool beside John. We need to talk, she said, eyes sharp. Emma's your friend, but she's hurting herself. You're the loser here. Coach intervened, but Brenda pressed on. Drop the fight. Let Emma have half. Save yourself. John's heart sank. Is that a threat? Reality, she said coolly. You've got a welding torch and a drinking problem. People will testify against you. John looked around. The bar's eyes were on him. Bluffing? Want to find out? She left, leaving a heavy silence. Coach sighed. Now you know. John nodded. Maybe it's time to play by my own rules. The following morning, John hacked into Emma's email from the public library computer, remembering Kyle's lessons. What he found was worse than he imagined. Months of conspiracies between Emma and Brenda, plans to poison his reputation, fake evidence, and even hiring the private investigator to fabricate incidents. The final message was chilling. A plan unfolding perfectly, using Cliff as a pawn with no intention of keeping him. John printed everything and took it to Tom Walsh. This is criminal conspiracy, Tom said, eyes wide. We can use this, but carefully. We set a trap. Later, John confronted Cliff in the gloomy warehouse where he stored his cars. Cliff read the emails, shame washing over him. I was a fool. She used me. John offered a lifeline. Help me tell the truth. You testify that Megan pursued you. Cliff hesitated, then nodded. Good. Together, we stop this. The courthouse was cold and stern. John, in his only suit, sat with Tom. Emma arrived, poised and cold, flanked by Brennan and Brenda looming in the gallery. Megan took the stand, spinning tales of abuse and instability, a masterful act that nearly convinced everyone. Then Tom unleashed the emails, one by one, exposing the lies. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read the damning evidence. Emma faltered, stammering weak excuses. Tom called Cliff, whose testimony confirmed the deceit. Emma broke down in tears. Brenda slipped away. The judge ruled swiftly. Emma's testimony was perjury. The case referred for criminal charges. John was awarded full custody of assets and fees. Outside, Emma tried to speak, but John walked past without a word. Cliff's apology was sincere but hollow. Can we be friends? John shook his head. No. Some things break too badly. 6 months later, John was back in the garage, welding with renewed purpose. Business flourished, respect returned. Emma had left town. Brenda faced charges. Brennan's career was in doubt. Cliff and Linda struggled to repair their fractured marriage. Kyle transferred closer to help with the shop. That John's life was quieter, lonelier, but stronger. A man rebuilt. Just as he finished a custom job, a car pulled up. Through the dusty window, he saw Emma, thinner, older, the weight of loss etched into her face. "John," she said softly, "I don't think we have anything to talk about. Just 5 minutes." Against his better judgment, John listened as she apologized. Her affair, the lies, the destruction. "That I loved you once," she whispered. John shook his head. "Maybe once. Not when you planned to take everything. Not when you tried to ruin me," she cried, desperate and broken. "Sorry doesn't fix 13 years. He watched her drive away, the blue welding flame flickering behind him, joining broken pieces into something stronger, a new life forged from fire and pain. But as the sparks danced, a shadow flickered in the corner of the garage. A message left unread, a secret yet to surface. Some fires never die quietly. The morning after Emma's visit, John sat alone in the garage, the scent of molten metal and burnt steel lingering in the air. The welding torch lay cold on the workbench, its blue flame extinguished but the heat of recent battles still radiating from the walls. He wiped the sweat and grime from his forehead and glanced toward the corner where a small, unassuming envelope lay half-hidden beneath a dusty tarp. Curiosity gnawed at him. He reached down and pulled it free, the paper crisp and unfamiliar. No handwriting, just a typed label. For John read when ready. His heart skipped a beat. Who had left it? Emma? Cliff? Or worse, someone he hadn't yet considered. John peeled back the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The words were typed in cold, precise font, but the message burned hotter than any flame. "John, you think you've won. You think the truth has set you free. But some truths run deeper than you know. There are things Emma never told you. Things even Brenda and Cliff didn't know. Secrets buried beneath years of silence. Be careful who you trust. The past isn't done with you yet." A friend. John's mind raced. A friend? Who could it be? Rosie? Coach? Or someone altogether different? He thought about the shadows he'd seen flickering across the edges of his life for months. The late-night whispers, the quiet phone calls, the feeling of eyes watching him when he thought he was alone. A chill swept through the garage despite the heat of the day. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He stared at it for a moment, then answered. "John?" The voice was low, familiar, but distorted enough to be unrecognizable. "You don't know me, but I know you, and I know what you're up against. If you want to find the real truth about Emma, about Ashwood, meet me at the old mill tonight. Midnight. Alone." The line went dead. John stared at the phone, the weight of the message settling like a lead blanket over his chest. Outside, the sun dipped low behind the skeletal remains of the steel mill, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for him. He knew one thing for certain. The past wasn't done with him. Not by a long shot. And as the night deepened, the welding sparks flickered once more in the darkness, like angry fireflies warning of battles yet to come. That night, John stood beneath the skeletal frame of Ashwood's abandoned steel mill, its rusted beams silhouetted against a bruised purple sky. The air was thick with cold mist, swirling around his boots as he waited, every nerve taut. The town was silent except for the distant hum of a freight train and the occasional creak of the old structure settling in the wind. John's worn leather jacket pulled tight against the chill, the faint glint of his wedding band catching what little moonlight filtered through the clouds. Sweat pricked his brow, not from the cold, but from the weight of what he might uncover. A shadow moved, stepping from behind a corroded pillar. The figure was cloaked in a dark jacket, face obscured beneath a baseball cap pulled low. "You came," the voice murmured, gravelly but controlled. John nodded, gripping the edge of his jacket. "Who are you? What's this about?" The stranger reached into their pocket and produced a small flash drive, holding it out like a lifeline. Proof. The real story behind Emma, Brenda, and the whole mess. Things they buried deep, things that'll change everything. John took the drive cautiously, his rough fingers brushing the stranger's briefly. "Why help me?" The figure hesitated, then shrugged. "Let's just say I don't like liars or cheats. And Ashwood's got more secrets than it knows what to do with." Before John could ask more, the stranger melted back into the shadows, vanishing into the night as silently as they had appeared. Heart pounding, John slipped the flash drive into his pocket and turned toward his truck, mind racing with questions. What was on that drive? How deep did the deception go? And who exactly was watching him from the shadows? As he drove away from the mill, the orange glow of the town's streetlights flickered past, casting long, wavering shadows across the cracked pavement. Shadows that seemed to whisper of betrayals yet uncovered and battles not yet fought. John's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The war wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Back in his garage, the familiar hum of machinery surrounded John as he settled at his dusty workbench, the flash drive lying heavily in his palm like a ticking time bomb. His fingers trembled slightly as he connected it to his laptop, the screen flickering to life in the dim light. The glow illuminated the lines of exhaustion etched into his face, the deep-set eyes, the stubble shadowing his jaw, the faint scar above his brow from a long-forgotten accident. Files began to load. Emails, photos, voice recordings, and documents that painted a far darker picture than John had imagined. There were conversations between Brenda and another unknown figure, a man with ties to the town's underbelly, discussing payoffs, threats, and plans to manipulate not just John, but others in Ashwood's close-knit community. One video caught his attention. A grainy clip showing Emma meeting late at night with a shadowy man outside a rundown pub. The man handed her an envelope thick with cash. She looked around nervously before tucking it into her purse. John's stomach churned. This wasn't just a divorce gone bad. This was a conspiracy rooted deep in lies, money, and power. Among the files, he found a list of names. Local officials, business owners, even people he trusted. It was a web of deceit, spun to trap him and destroy anyone who dared stand in their way. John leaned back, the chair creaking beneath his weight. His calloused hands clenched into fists. The quiet desperation that had gripped him since discovering Emma's betrayal transformed into a burning resolve. He wasn't just fighting for his business or his sanity anymore. He was fighting to expose a darkness that had poisoned Ashwood from within. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. *, be careful who you trust. They're watching. *, John glanced over his shoulder. The shadows in the garage seeming to pulse and shift as if alive. He picked up his welding torch, the blue flame flickering to life in his steady hand. Sometimes, to burn away the rot, you had to get your hands dirty again. And in Ashwood, the sparks were just beginning to fly.